Every traveler wants to score the best deal on their next trip, and some of us are willing to take a few risks in order to get the cheapest possible flight tickets. Which is why in today's video, I'll be covering 5 pretty risky flight booking hacks for you to get the absolute cheapest flights this year. Proceed with caution. The first risky hack to get the cheapest flight would be to book a flight to a closed destination. Many countries around the world do not accept international visitors for a period of time due to things like pandemics or conflicts. Despite a country being closed to international tourists, airlines are still going to sell future flights to those destinations. So if you think a country is going to open up several months down the road, consider booking a flight to that destination now. Booking a non-refundable flight to a closed destination is obviously going to be your cheapest option, but also your riskiest. Which brings me right into risky option number 2. Consider buying a basic, non-refundable, non-changeable ticket is often significantly cheaper than buying a flexible one. With a basic flight ticket, you will have no flexibility to make changes to your flight, and if you do decide to cancel the flight, you are not getting any money back or even an airline credit. But if you are pretty certain of your travel plans, you can save quite a bit of money by booking one of these non-flexible fares. Especially in times like these where there is a lot of global uncertainty, airlines want to lock in some extra cash now. And because of this, they're willing to entice travelers with these dirt cheap fares on non-refundable, non-changeable flights. According to the US Department of Transportation, a consumer is entitled to a full refund if the airline canceled the flight, regardless of the reason, and the consumer chooses not to travel. I did a full video on passenger rights for canceled or changed flights and will link to that below. You can almost always get a refund. Another way to save some money on your flight booking would be to opt out of the airline's insurance. When you are buying a flight online, right before you hit the payment button, you will often see a box check that you are getting the airline's insurance and that cost is being added to your total. Every airline is different in terms of what insurance they offer and what the price will be. You can uncheck this box and decide to opt out of the airline's insurance. You may even be presented with a pop-up window that is warning you if you would like to proceed, at which point you can ignore this window and proceed to the payment without the insurance inclusion. This isn't even that risky, assuming that you are getting insurance elsewhere. I personally always uncheck this box and opt out of the airline's insurance and will head to Safety Wing to purchase my travel insurance separately. They have the cheapest prices for the coverage that they offer, and I'll link to them down below. So if you are purchasing travel insurance separately, or if you already have travel insurance with your credit card, make sure you check, then you probably don't even need the airline's travel insurance, and this is an extra cost that you do not need to be paying for. Something that I have done many times in the past and that can save you a significant amount of money on your flight ticket would be choosing to buy your flight through an online travel agency or third-party booking site like Expedia, Flight Network, and Cheapo Air. There are several benefits to booking your ticket with these flight aggregators, since you can see flight options from all different airlines and sometimes score an amazing deal that you wouldn't be able to find or book elsewhere. Seeing many options and then choosing to book with one of these third-party sites where you can score an amazing deal sounds good. And it is good when everything goes as planned. The problem is that with travel these days, a lot of things are uncertain, and it's very likely that your travel plans are not going to go as planned. This is where this tip becomes a little bit risky, because if you do need to make any changes or cancellations to your trip, you will have to deal directly with the third-party booking site like Expedia, despite going directly to the airline. They are essentially middlemaning the process for you, and we all know how difficult it can be to reach an airline to make a change. Imagine having to reach one of these sites, which are notorious for having very poor customer care, and then having to go through them to get to the airline, to get back to them, to get back to you in order to make any changes or even to get the refund or flight credit that you are entitled to. So if you booked your flight through Expedia, but you're flying with United Airlines, your purchase is actually with Expedia and you are subject to their fees, conditions, and terms. These sites are notorious for poor and slow customer service, and they can be a pain to get a refund or flight credit from, even if you are entitled to one. These third-party booking sites sometimes add additional service fees on top of what the airline is also going to charge you if you do need to make any changes to your flight. So if you do decide to take a risk and book through a site like Expedia and Flight Network instead of with the airline directly, be sure to keep your fingers crossed that all of your travel plans go as planned. Another risky flight booking tip that could save you a lot of money is to book your flight tickets as separate tickets, perhaps even with different airlines, instead of booking a round trip or connecting flight. If you book a round trip ticket where you depart from one airport, fly into another airport, and then return to the original airport, you are restricted to departing and returning to the same airport with the same airline. It's convenient, but often not the cheapest option. Let's say you're flying to Boston for a one-week trip. Instead of booking a round trip from Miami to Boston back to Miami with American Airlines, you could consider booking 2 separate one-way tickets instead. It may be cheaper for you to fly from Miami to Boston with American Airlines, and then a week later you could find a flight that is much cheaper going from Boston back to Miami with Delta Airlines. Instead of booking a round trip with American Airlines, you're now able to use a different flight carrier or airline for each leg of your trip. Choosing to purchase separate tickets instead of a round trip can also give you flexibility in the airports that you fly in and out of. In this example, you could fly from Miami International Airport into Boston, but then your return flight could be booked flying into the Fort Lauderdale Airport instead. You may find a cheaper or better flight. In addition to having flexibility as to which airline you fly with on your departing flight and your returning flight, as well as which airport you fly into and out of, you can take separate ticketing a step further if you have a connecting flight. For example, if you had a flight to Paris with a stop in London, you could book Miami to London with one airline and then London to Paris with another airline. It could even be out of London's smaller airport, Glasgow, that has many budget flights around Europe. It's easy to see how booking separate tickets instead of a round-trip flight or a connecting flight is going to give you a lot more flexibility and also potentially score you a better flight deal. The risky part of this is that your flights are no longer connected as one trip. So if something happens to one of your flights, the sequential flights are not going to be adjusted automatically. So if your departing flight from Boston to Miami is cancelled, your flight with a different airline booked from Miami back home to Boston is still scheduled. It's then up to you to cancel or change it, at which point you're probably not getting any credit or refund. In the Miami to London to Paris example, if your flight from Miami to London is delayed and you end up missing your flight from London to Paris that was booked with a different airline as a separate ticket, the flight is also not going to be adjusted. You have lost that flight ticket and will need to rebook completely separately, again likely not getting any credit or refund for the flight. Leave a devil emoji down in the comments if you are daredevil enough to try any of these risky flight booking hacks. Also feel free to leave any of your own tricks down in the comments below, as I and other fellow travelers will thank you. Thanks so much for watching. Best of luck grabbing those cheap flights, and then I hope you'll subscribe so you can join us back here for more travel tips and hacks next week. Thanks for watching. Bye.